welcome back to our Florida podcast. I'm your host, May. On Fridays, I discuss one of Florida's diverse wildlife and ecosystem.
And I am your other host, Kaylee. On Mondays, I share about Florida history. This week, we talked about Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, wrapping up our Women's History Month. If you haven't listened, it's a great episode. We talk about how much work she was involved in preserving the Everglades and protecting it, even well after it was established as a national park.
She's pretty cool. She's a badass. Definitely give that one a listen.
The quotes from there
Pretty
are
great.
fantastic.
The quotes, I call her a spicy grandma. Definitely don't want to miss that one. All right, so this week's episode will be about Florida's state animal. So to give a little bit of backstory on how we come to the state animal, in 1982, elementary students throughout the state decided on our state animal. All 67 counties were sent a ballot for the children to vote on, and they were given the choice of the American alligator, the manatee, the panther, or the dolphin. Surprisingly, students overwhelmingly picked the Florida Panther. And
sorry, what year was that?
Go ahead, go for it. 1982.
Okay. So our aunts probably got to vote on that.
It
would have been
did,
too young for our parents, but our aunts probably got to vote on that.
Way too young for our
What
parents.
Would you have picked?
I would have been tied between the manatee or the panther. I've always loved panthers, though. I think there's something that's very beautiful and majestic about them, and I absolutely love them. But I also absolutely love manatees, and I think they're just
I think I would have gone
adorable.
manatee. I feel like they're more specifically Florida, but I do love the Florida Panther, so yeah.
I do think I probably would have went... Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I would definitely stuck between the two. Honestly, elementary school me probably would have said that the alligator's overrated, and that would be extremely cliche. So, definitely would have said that at least for sure. But with that bit of a backstory in Florida and its state animal, this week's episode will be about the Florida Panther. I will share the Florida Panther's habitat, history, diet, genetic concerns, and ongoing conservation efforts. The Florida Panther originally ranged from many of the southeastern United States. These states included Alabama, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, of course, and small sections of Tennessee and South Carolina. Now, due to nearly being hunted to extinction and loss of habitat, they only have a population breeding in the southwestern tip of Florida.
Wow.
So they went from being in several states and to now they're just in Florida. The specific, like the Florida Panthers, just in Florida, and it's not even through North Florida. It is just in the not smallest, but a very small section of Florida. So drastic decrease here. Now, currently they are in the Big Cypress National. Nice. Currently, they are in the Big Cypress National Reserve, Everglades National Park, the Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge, and definitely cannot pronounce this one, but Picayune?
How do you spell it?
I don't know. Picayune. Strand State Forest. Picayune, I think.
Where is that?
I think
do you
so,
know?
Actually. Nope, no idea.
Doesn't really matter.
I'm about to tell you though.
I don't think I've ever heard of that.
I meant to look it up before I even got it. I was just like, I did not do that before recording. And I also didn't know that we had another state forest besides Ocala. But it is in Collier County. And it's near Naples. Yeah. But it's relatively all they're all like the same area.
It's all South Florida.
If you're looking at them on a map. Yeah. And then typically you'll see some in rural counties like Collier, Lee, and Miami-Dade County. Florida Panthers are wide-ranging territorial animals. Males require 250 square miles, and females need between 70 to 200 square miles. So when these ranges overlap with male panthers, they will fight to protect territory. Typically within these territories, a male panther will use physical signs or pheromones to give a warning. Some of the physical signs is feces or claw markings. So, when panthers are first born, they have dark brown spots and usually bright blue eyes. As they reach adulthood, the spots begin to fade to the tan and the eyes adjust from a blue to a yellow and greenish color. Panthers have white undersides and typically have black tips on their ears and on their at the end of their tails. So male panthers are going to range in size from about 100 to 160 pounds, or 45.5 to 73 kilograms. And then from ground to shoulder height, they range from 24 to 28 inches or 60 to 70 centimeters. In total length, a male panther can range from 6 feet to a little over 7 feet.
They're both somehow bigger and smaller than I imagine in some ways.
I think it's because of how I felt the same way. I think it's because of kind of how long they are. And they kind of remind me of a
Yeah,
slinky.
that's definitely, they're lanky.
And I think that's kind of the reason why you think that they're you would feel like they should be bigger, but I don't know, it's kind of weird. I felt the same way, and that's kind of the only way. I was like, you also kind of remind me a little bit, literally like Slinky. So
And the baby
that's my
eye thing,
comparison.
that's like how house cats do. Usually the blue eyes turn to a green or amber.
Yeah. Female panthers are similar to male panthers in length, but they typically weigh anywhere from 64 to 100 pounds or 29 to 45.5 kilograms. Female panthers reach maturity in about 2 to 3 years, and panthers will usually mate through the months of October through March, giving birth typically between March and then July. Panthers will have anywhere from 1 to 4 kittens at once, and the gestation period is around
Really?
3
That's
months.
short?
Yeah, I thought that was super interesting. I thought that was really cool. Not the worst. I think there's other things. It's not like it's a full year or
I also
anything,
I wouldn't have
a
known
lot
that they could
nicer.
have up to 4. I'm assuming, are they called kittens? Okay.
Yeah, they are called kittens. Yeah. That's what I'll be referencing. They're literally called
Cute.
kittens, which I think is adorable. Also, if you take a baby panther though, and you take a domesticated kitten or a domesticated house cat as a kitten, and you compare them, I'm like, kitten seems like a little bit of a stretch. But the female panther will have her kittens in a prepared den for the kittens to stay and nurse for about 2 to 3 weeks. This ideally allows for them to be kept in a safe place while mom hunts for food. Now, you kind of mentioned it as well. The kittens, when they're first born, they have blue eyes. And so because of that, they are first blind when they are born. So it's extremely important they have a safe place when their mom is not there to protect them. Partially also their mortality to actually reach past the point of being blind is not the greatest. Just because, if they get out there while mom's gone, mom comes back, there's only so much, what any other predators or anything else can go ahead and go after the little ones. But their dens typically is a thicket with dense saw palmettos where the kittens can be protected from sun, rain, and hopefully predators. The kittens will stay in the den with mom for about 2 months, and after this point, they can go ahead and start learning how to hunt and just to start exploring.
Very cool.
Once the kittens reach the age of 2, they will officially leave mom and go out to their own territory. Typically, females can stay near mom's territory for a while, but males will have to separate and move farther out to prevent fights with other male panthers. The Florida panther is a carnivore that will eat white-tailed deer, wild hogs, raccoons, alligators, and armadillos. When hunting, panthers will stalk their prey and wait for the time to rush and spring at their kill. They can leap about 15 feet forward to sink their claws in the animal's back. When killing white-tailed deer or wild hogs, they will try to bite a section of the prey's neck. So what that will do is when they bite that section of the neck, it basically severs the spinal cord and will go ahead and take down deer or the hogs.
15 feet is 3 times their length, or twice as
their size. Twice their size. Yeah.
Just significant.
Which is also why I say I think they're slinkies. I think it's a valid point. Anyone that wants to say that's really silly, I think it's valid. Panthers may eat 20 to 30 pounds of meat at one time, and female panthers with kittens will consume even more. So when they're eating their kill, just about all portions are consumed, except typically the stomach and intestines.
Maybe the stomach acid?
That's what I gathered. I'm not entirely sure how typical that is because I feel like, if you're hungry and there's something there, you're going to eat it. But I did read a little bit about it that sometimes they're not ate. They'll kind of just stick them to the side and
I'd imagine maybe stomach acid or something can make it less appealing. I don't know. I'm making that up too.
I can also imagine that probably it's just not that great.
I've been around
an
animal being butchered, and if you puncture its stomach or intestine, it's a terrible, terrible, terrible smell.
Not great. Yeah. So the heart, liver, lungs, muscles from shoulders and hindquarters, and large bones are broken and chewed on. Basically, just about everything, as far as even bones, are just broken down and chewed on as much as possible. A study showed that a panther's diet mostly is natural prey like deer, wild hogs, or raccoons. To gather this information, they examined scats as well as necropsy of dead panthers. Just work with it. Basically, they looked at dead panthers, okay? Their percentages are from biologists, and this was basically done from they looked at panthers from 1995 to 2014, with the following animals most consumed during that time. So raccoon came at the highest at 24%, white-tailed deer at 22%, wild hogs at 21%, nine-branded armadillo at 10%, the Virginia opossum at 5%, domestic cats at 5%, and then rabbit at 3%, domestic goat at 1%, and they had unknown at 2%, which I'm really curious what's classified as unknown.
I mean, who knows? It could be any.
I'm assuming it's probably just like something that's like completely unidentifiable, but also what's
Yeah,
considered
it's probably
unknown.
just like we know it's not these things, but it could be anything or such a small amount or pythons or who knows, you know. Interesting though.
Yeah. So in order for Panthers to actually I mentioned these numbers and why it's so important about what is actually being consumed typically by Panthers a little bit later on. So just kind of remember that the top three by a long shot were raccoons, white-tailed deer, wild hogs, and then one of the last at the very bottom were domestic cats, rabbits, and a domestic goat at 1%. So typically, to remain in shape, they need to consume the equivalent of one deer or hog, and females with kittens will need to double this amount. So the Florida panther has faced an abundance of threats over the last several years. The panther species was one of the first added to the endangered species list in 1973. They have also been on the federal endangered species list since 1967. So one of the biggest threats and one of the most detrimental to their survival was a bounty to hunt panthers, which was recreated in 1832. At this time, due to an increase in panthers killing cattle, they were viewed as a threat to humans and livestock. Before the bounty was put in place, thousands of white-tailed deer were slaughtered to eliminate a tick that causes Texas cattle fever. It could be assumed that this would explain the increase in cattle fed on by panthers. So, essentially, in 1832, a little bit before this, panthers were going out and killing a decent amount of cattle. So farmers, of course, were losing out on a lot of money. That was their livelihood. And so it basically it felt like they were going to, that farmers, their cattle was endangered, that people, humans, children, they were all affected by this. They're just viewed as like, okay, this is gonna be a threat for us. And so basically in 1832, they created that bounty because they're like, we need to eliminate this. This is gonna be an issue. It seemed a little dramatic in my opinion, but what did we know in
Well, I
1832?
feel like it mirrors the same thing that happened out west. Like it was a big push to kill all the buffalo to like snuff the Native American population. And then all of a sudden you had wolves now going after cattle because their natural, prey source was very much eliminated. And now wolves are the enemy and they get almost wiped off the face of the map because everyone's like, they're a threat. And I mean, they are to their livelihood and everything, but it's because of a larger imbalance in the system.
Yeah, exactly. And so it seems that the imbalance for this example was just that, you know, thousands of white-tailed deer were slaughtered to eliminate that tick for Texas cattle fever. And then in result, panthers were feeding on cattle because you just eliminated a decent portion of what they consume on a daily. Also, we just talked about how to remain in shape, panthers need to consume one deer or hog at least basically weekly. So from 1832 to the 1980s, the Florida panther was hunted to near extinction. Around 20 to 30 remained in the
Wow.
50s. So to kind of put this in a little bit of perspective, in the 17th century, they expected to have around 1,300 panthers. Going into the start of the 19th century, there were approximately 500 remaining. So basically from the 50s to around the 90s, there were only about 20 to 30 panthers remaining. Could have been less, probably was a little less, just because that was a very rough estimate, what they could figure out. So we went from having over 1,000, and then now we have probably less than 20 to 30 remaining.
That's so few.
So few. I read an article, and someone was kind of justifying, well, if there was so many at one point, that is kind of a long length of time for us to go down that many. And it's like, that is a very that's a very interesting way to look at it. And it's not like you're not wrong, but like also it never should have gotten to that level.
Well, I feel like
Never,
when you
never
get
should have
down to
gotten to that
20 or
level.
30 of something, now you're getting worried about the gene pool being diverse enough, you know? Like that's such a small amount of
Exactly.
anything. Like obviously, only having 1,300, there's plenty of other species that like if they're only 1,300, that would be just crazy. And that seemed to have worked for them or been their normal-ish numbers. It's kind of hard to say what's normal when you're introducing all these different factors all the time, but 20 to 30 is so few of anything.
I also I wonder what the deer population was in that time as well. Like, how much did that increase by eliminating so many? So, like, not even just deer, but like deer, wild hogs, and raccoons, because raccoons are typically known to like carrying rabies and different diseases. So, how much of an increase of all these different things that hogs and deer alone affect farmers so much, farmers and agricultural on such a level still even now. And so it's like, was that the greatest idea? And also, how much did that affect? And I did see a couple comments where people were just like, well, you had hunters that could just eliminate the deer and the hogs, and it's like, yes, but at the same time,
Yeah.
no. So
Yeah, I mean that's just why some of these
it's very
studies are so
interesting.
important that like kind of look at the whole ecosystem because yeah, there's so much more to it than there's a
There's a
balance. Yeah.
balance.
And there's different things that they don't know are even
Yeah.
affected. Like I don't want to misquote it, but there's something about like the wolf study that when wolves were taken out, like the beaver population went way higher. It literally, by wolves not being there, the lay of the land is changing because there were more. It was something about like there's more beavers and then there's more beaver ponds and it's like flooding
Like,
areas. And that's going back to
yeah.
like the wolves. And it's the same sort of complication. Like, sure, we can kill more deer and we can kill more hogs, but also how much money is still being spent by the state to eliminate, especially hogs that are invasive and like certain state parks and certain protected areas, like how much money is being spent on that and could be saved just by having a better balance of the population that's supposed to be there.
And not jumping to, I don't know, want to say like jumping to answers, but also just like let's slow down a little at the same time, and let's make sure we have as much information and facts
Yeah,
that we can have
chances
available
are
to
it's not
us.
just a simple, straightforward solution.
In hopes of replenishing the population and increasing the panther numbers, in 1995 they released 8 female Texas cougars to breed with the Florida Panthers. The hopes were a new generation and some genetic diversity would help build the population, which thankfully it did, as the panther population tripled by 2007, which is really, really great because without bringing in that genetic variation, there was absolutely no way that the Florida Panther was going to survive in the same aspect of where it should have been. There was no diversity whatsoever. There was not going to be, as well as genetic
Yeah, I
concerns
mean,
would
you're looking at
just
incest.
eliminate.
If you don't have that genetic diversity, so like you're gonna have incest and like the issues that come with that. So like who knows, maybe they're losing half a jaw or something a generation or two later. But beyond that, like they're likely gonna be susceptible to the same thing. So all it takes is like a certain disease to come through and now they're all gone because there's no variation there.
Yeah, exactly. Currently, genetic concerns play a huge role in the continuing rise of the population. Without genetic expansion, more panthers will continue to die from diseases and inbreeding. They are already seeing where some panthers have almost like a cowlick on their fur, as well as their tail at the end of it is crooked. And that's already going to be two aspects where it's showing that there's inbreeding and the genetic pool is just not wide enough. It's not enough. And so the more inbred panthers they're seeing that they are dying from diseases and just poor genetics, essentially. Panthers currently only remain in South Florida, and their numbers continue to decrease due to habitat loss, preventing them from expanding, increasing genetic diversity. Part of this is because the Caloosahatchee River goes from west from Lake Okeechobee to Fort Myers, and that cuts the state in half. So, panthers so far have not successfully expanded farther north due to roads and highways that have been built and that have been expanded. And these roads and highways are killing more and more panthers each year. So, the Florida Department of Transportation, the University of Central Florida, and University of Florida are in the works of producing crossings for panthers so they would be able to expand north. Some of the wildlife crossings could look like bridges, underpasses, box culverts, drainage pipes, and shelves built under bridges. To put this in perspective and kind of express why this would be so beneficial, huge for the Florida Panthers. Every year, typically at least 20 Panthers are killed by vehicles. Numbers for 2024 showed 29 Panthers were killed by vehicles. This is the most amount of Panthers killed since 2016, where 42 had been killed in that time. Yeah, so we were doing a little bit better, and then it just seems that it's gotten worse. And I believe, don't hold me to it, but I believe 6 for 2025 have already been killed and hit by a car.
Well, I imagine they probably do most of their traveling at night.
Yeah, early morning, like super, super early.
So they're traveling at night and in the mornings. So it's hard to see. It's dark.
Yeah, so it's hard to see. It's dark. We're also probably driving a little bit too fast than what we should be. Back roads, probably relatively quiet, what we assume relatively quiet roads. So, um, at the beginning of the episode, we mentioned that male panthers need about 200 miles of territory, meaning they have a much larger home range than what a female needs. Within these ranges, typically include roads and highways. So, according to Florida Fish and Wildlife, around 60% of males are being killed. Most male panthers being killed by vehicles are young panthers expanding to their own territory, so shortly after they've left mom. And almost all man-panther collisions are panthers younger than 3 years old.
Oh, just babies trying to get out.
Yeah, exactly. It's just literally the babies that are trying to, they finally left mom and they have to go even farther than what the female panthers have to, due to territory and things. So they're having to go so far out, and most of them aren't even making it, to that next point. So we're not increasing any diversity. We're just kind of killing off the new generation by how many that we're hitting every single year.
Yeah. Yikes.
In 1989, a female panther from Everglades National Park died, and at first they weren't able to identify the immediate cause of death. After further tests, they discovered her liver contained high levels of mercury. This was the same year that high levels of mercury were found in fish. Further studies showed that it seemed the raccoons were carrying a high amount of mercury in this area, and so they believed that this panther had been feeding primarily on smaller prey, especially raccoons. And so, because of the raccoons eating the fish that had the high amount of mercury, after some time, it ended up killing her. And so, for a little while, they did think this was going to be a much major concern and threat for the Florida panther. It seemed to have only been a couple, and that was kind of a little bit far off. And so that is it's good. It would have been great if, it wasn't an issue in the first place, but that's okay. And so since 1989, the mercury levels in fish and birds of the Everglades have dropped significantly due to better technology that reduced mercury emissions.
Oh, that makes sense then. Yeah, because mercury is one of those things that the further up it goes in the food chain, the more concentrated it gets. That's why you have to watch for tuna and stuff for mercury poisoning, or why it's not part of why it's not recommended for pregnant women, because the tuna eats the smaller fish, and the further up the food chain, the mercury just keeps getting more and more concentrated, higher and higher
Oh, that's
amounts.
so interesting. I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's kind of cool. Also, not great, but really cool.
Yeah, it's scary. It's one of those things that being at the top of the food chain doesn't always work out in your favor.
No, I mean, if that's literally exactly what happened with the panther here, is that, raccoons were eating all these fish, so it started basically with what was in the water and the fish, and then went from that to the raccoons, and then so forth. Yeah. So these are just some of the examples, and some stories about threats that panthers have faced. Overall, panthers have faced and continue to face many threats and still have a ways to go before they're actually able to be removed from the Endangered Species Act. In order for the Florida panther to no longer be considered threatened, they will need 3 populations of at least 240 individuals. Currently, there's about 200 panthers in the wild now. So in 2007, just kind of tie this all together. In 2007, we had almost tripled how many panthers we had by bringing in those cougars to increase genetic variation and such, basically. So that gave us a little under 100, give or take. And we are now in 2025, and there is only around 200 panthers now. So it will probably take quite a bit of time and research and just continuing to make sure that we are doing better before these panthers are even come close to being able to be removed from the Species Act.
And I guess like the biggest thing with that is going to be expanding their territory. Now that we've got genetic diversity, it's going to be expanding that territory so that the next generations of panthers actually have a chance.
Exactly. And so they essentially need to expand up north again. So we need to, one, like you said, we need 200 miles for a male to have his own territory. And then females need 70 to 100 miles for their territory. And so we need more or enough rural.
I hate that word. I hate that word
I hate
so
it too.
much.
I said it just fine at the beginning of the episode, and now that I gotta think about it, it's not happening. So it's cute.
I had that in school. I had a teacher who was like, "Can you say that word again?" And I was like, "Why?
No, I can't.
No."
Please don't. Yeah. And so basically we need them to go north into these secluded areas that don't have buildings and homes and all these things. And we just need them to continue expanding. And ideally, I would imagine they need to go ahead and also expand back out of Florida again as well and to get into other states. And also we just need to stop eliminating so much of their habitat so quickly.
Yeah, so I imagine that's part of why they ended up in South Florida to begin with, is because like the Everglades is so large and it's there a lot of the surrounding areas around it are fairly protected too. Like for as much development as there is, there's still a lot of space. So like there's enough prey, there's enough space. Like that's why they were able to stay there. And then there's other places in the state that's not like too populated. Like I would imagine the Ocala State Forest or Tate's Hell State Forest up in the Panhandle are probably good places for them, but they can't get there because our highway system's cutting it all up, and then there's so much development in between.
Yeah, exactly. And literally, basically, I think ideally, if we could figure out a much better way for them to continue expanding up north, then I think that overall it's gonna help so much. But it's one, we've got to build or make these paths for them to get through, and that takes time. So I think just between the two, you've got the time that it takes for us to build these paths, and then also the time for them to actually get to want to use them and to actually be using them and to, I guess, kind of feel safe to use them is also just something that's very time
Well, it's a
consuming.
project that could last well beyond like or well through our lifetimes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this has been, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking like
Overall,
200 years ago, this started as an issue. Sorry.
no, literally 200 years ago, this was the start. Overall, I was curious to learn how Florida panthers are captured because there's a lot of research and there's a lot of information that's been found on panthers and to try to help and understand what we need to do for them. So the National Park Service established a capture team in Big Cypress National Preserve in 2003. This team goes out looking for tracks in panther movement. And so once they find the activity, they go out to track the panther. Typically, they are using hounds to track the panther's scent. And what they'll do is once the hound has found the scent, they will go ahead and trail the big cat up a tree. Yeah, and so this allows for the capture team to sedate the panther. And of course, they're treeing the cat and either depending on how it's worked out, once the panther is sedated, they will go ahead and climb up the tree to secure and lower the panther, or if they can, they place a portable like air cushion and a net to catch the panther when coming down from the tree.
Quite the operation.
Quite the operation, yeah.
So that whole like call the firefighter out to get the kitten out of the tree, but it's a much bigger kitten.
Much, much bigger. Also, think about the fact that, like, this is in Big Cypress National Preserve, South Florida, where it's obviously not developed, and they're just like out in the middle of like actually nowhere. Like it's a lot of work.
Yeah, you're tromping through like saw palmettos and half of it's
Like they
probably
have some
underwater.
like really high, really big buggies for sections of it, but it gets to a certain point like you can't get through it anymore at some point. So like you're just going out there and walking, and then you've got dogs, and yeah, it's probably quite the process.
Yeah.
When they go ahead and sedate panthers, sometimes they will collect blood, skin biopsies, and hair for genetic analysis, and they will shave sections of hair for mercury testing. They will then also be vaccinated and be given a deworming agent.
Oh, wow.
Part of the conservation efforts to understand its movements and patterns and increase the population is to tattoo and collar panthers. It will get an identification number in each ear, and a passive integrated transponder or a PIT tag will go underneath the skin. Typically, a radio collar is attached so they can track panther movements, understand that panther's territory, and any other information to aid in helping the population. A lot goes into trying to get these panthers tagged. So I just listed 3 things that have to get done. So one, they tattoo their ear, they get a PIT number, a passive integrated transponder, and then they have their collar. And I'll have some pictures that shows what these collars look like. But they have to also have that collar so that they can actually track how many miles these panthers are going, and like where are they trying to do, what's the range. So it's quite a bit goes into it.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And so much time, and that's a lot of money and stuff too.
Lots of money, lots of time. So the month of March is Florida Panther Awareness. So just a few of the things that you can do to help: report sightings, drive safely, and spread awareness. If you ever spot an injured or dead Florida Panther, you can go ahead and call 888-408. It's extremely important if you do spot a panther, especially a panther that isn't or is uncollared, or it doesn't seem to have any identification to it, that they are reported and called in, so that's another panther that they can go ahead and track and to figure out its whereabouts and see what's going on, if there's anything that we can do to help and assist.
Yeah, I imagine even with dogs and stuff, it cannot be easy to find them if they're not, already tracked in any sort of way. Because they're really,
No, when they have like such a wide, 200 miles,
yeah.
that means a panther could be anywhere in that 200 miles. Like,
And that
that's a
there's
lot.
not other panthers in that space. Like generally,
Yeah.
they're so spread out. So you're that whole needle in a haystack thing, and they don't want to be seen. That's their specialty,
No, they
is not
don't.
being seen and not being found. Wow. Probably
Exactly.
like the one thing that's going for them, that's like keeping them around this long despite like those crazy numbers, being down to like 20 or 30.
Yeah, I think it's also such a shame that there was that bounty that was put in place, and we hunted them down to so many that, there's actually not any verified or documented cases of Florida panthers attacking humans in Florida. Like,
Wow.
there's not anything that's been verified at all for it. And so, 1832, during that time, it was like, oh, but they're such a threat to my family, they're a threat to my children. And it's like, to your cattle, yes, absolutely, yes. I understand that. I get it. But, to your family, like, they're not.
It's not, but it feels like it. It's like, there's very few cases of like wolves, and I keep going back to the wolf example. It's just the one I know a little bit more about. But, there's not that many examples of them actually attacking people, but they're really scary, and they've been in pop culture for like such a long time, that they're bad and that they're scary and that they're evil. And yeah, I think it really sits with us.
This is about it for the Florida Panther. I'm sharing some facts and information for you guys. A selfish little fun fact: when researching why the Florida Panther is our state animal, I learned that the state soil is the Mayaca fine sand. In 1989, the legislature designated the official state soil because it occurs on more than 1.5 million acres of flatwoods. So it is the most extensive soil in the state.
I knew that. I forgot I knew that.
I
But
figured you
I knew
would.
from land
I
judging and
figured.
FFA and
Yeah.
4-H. Yeah. Yeah.
I did not know.
Yeah, something I forgot, but I did actually know that. Our state bird is the mosquito, right?
No, the
No?
mockingbird.
Okay. I couldn't remember. I feel like I
Mockingbird.
had heard someone say the mosquito, and I wasn't really sure if it was a joke or not. Okay, mockingbird. Yeah. All right, never mind.
Yeah. I will. I'm probably gonna put out like kind of what our state stuff is for anyone that's been here a long time. You learn it in history class, but for any of our new Floridians, I'll
Or
probably
old
do a little post to
Floridians
share.
that forgot to pay
Or
attention
old
in fourth
Floridians that
grade.
need to know that it's not a mosquito. That would be so funny.
Yeah, right.
That would be really funny, not gonna lie.
Yeah. That's really cool. I
But
didn't know that about the Florida Panthers. So the rumors when we were kids of like Florida Panthers killing calves in like Mayaca or around Mayaca State Park, probably not true. Probably
probably not
coyotes or
true.
something,
Yeah.
because it seems like they're not really expanding past Caloosahatchee. Or if they are, it's really, really unknown.
I am gonna have to fact check this, and I wish I would have done it when I was writing this episode. But I did learn that, that whole story about you can hear a panther and it sounds like a woman screaming and you shouldn't go after it because it's not someone screaming, it's a panther. Um, is female panthers trying to get attention from male panthers.
Really?
I believe, yeah. Um,
I remember hearing a story about that in like Little House on the Prairie, and it really stuck with me. That like the panther or the cougar scream sounds like a woman's scream, and I was like, mm-mm.
yeah, and panthers also they don't roar. They only like they have like yowls and growls and literally like combinations of just screams basically too.
Creepy.
Yeah, right?
It's
Kind of
interesting
cool though.
too. It's interesting that you bring up that like there's no reports of panthers ever attacking people or like Florida panthers ever attacking people because I don't have any stories of that. Whereas I feel like out west every year there's like a story. Usually it's of a young mountain lion kind of going after somebody. Sometimes they actually get a kid or like someone out on a run on their own or whatever. And what they found in those cases is it's usually that the cougar, their mom died when they were younger, so they never really learned proper hunting behavior. So then add that with like overcrowding and stuff, and that's when they end up having human attacks.
I also feel like I've seen more stories about bobcats attacking people or having more issues with bobcats than what you do with the panther.
Well, I think that has a lot to do too with like just not having enough space. Everyone,
Yeah,
the
actually.
houses are in their homes. There's only so much to eat and so much space, and yeah, they're I'm sure they have certain territory requirements as well.
Yeah. Alrighty. Well, this concludes this week's episode on the Florida Panthers. I hope you have enjoyed and learned something about the Florida state animal. And if you have ever spotted a Florida Panther, we would love to hear all about it. Thanks so much for listening.
Yeah, so like, follow, subscribe wherever you listen. If you have a Florida Panther story, email us at ourfloridapodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear those stories. I have never seen one, and it is definitely a dream of mine to see a Florida Panther in the wild.
Me too.
Oh, it'd be so cool.
I don't think it's gonna happen, but I'd love it.
We also have it, like we said in the last episode, we also haven't really spent any time in South Florida, so it's a little on us. We'll have to amend that this year. All right, guys, have a great week. We'll see you on Monday. Bye.